It started like any other day. Ethan Grayson wasn't remarkable by any measure. A mid-level software engineer in a bustling city, living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment that echoed his quiet, predictable existence. The kind of life where he found comfort in routine, the same coffee shop, the same work commute, the same late-night scroll through conspiracy forums he didn't even take seriously. But on this particular Tuesday, his routine cracked. As he stepped out of his apartment, Ethan noticed something unusual. His mailbox, one of those old rusting ones with a squeaky hinge, was open. Strange, because he never forgot to lock it. Inside, among the usual junk mail and unpaid bills, was a single envelope. No return address, just his name, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Curiosity sparked. His fingers fumbled as he tore the envelope open. Inside was a single page, yellowed as if aged. Its contents, a date, March 27th, 2032. 10 years from now? Ethan muttered under his breath, flipping the paper over for more. Nothing, no signature, no explanation. Just that date, bold and centered, etched into the page as if it were burned into his future. The whole day, Ethan couldn't shake it. The number followed him like a shadow. Why that date? Who had left it? He thought of tossing the letter, but something gnawed at him. A kind of unease that worms its way into your thoughts and refuses to leave. Later that night, Ethan's routine took over again. With his laptop perched on the armrest of his sagging couch, he scrolled mindlessly through conspiracy forums. UFO sightings, secret societies, time travelers, typical fodder for late-night escapism. Normally, he'd laugh at the absurdity of it all. But tonight, the forum felt different. As he absent-mindedly refreshed the page, a new thread popped up at the top. March 27th, 2032, the day the world changes. Ethan froze. The post's author, someone with the cryptic username Watcher88, claimed they had seen the future. The thread detailed glimpses of a catastrophic event, though the details were hazy, veiled in cryptic riddles and warnings about meddling too deeply. Ethan couldn't breathe. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? For the next few hours, he scoured every corner of the internet, chasing a trail of breadcrumbs that only led to more questions. Articles, videos, even old chat room archives. Whispers of March 27th, 2032 appeared again and again, always hinting at something monumental, but never saying what. Then, at 3:17 a.m., his screen blinked. A private message from Watcher88. You've seen the date. Don't ignore it. Meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. at the Blue Star Cafe. Come alone. A cold chill ran down his spine. Ethan's rational brain screamed at him to shut his laptop and forget it. It was a prank, a joke, an elaborate hoax to get a rise out of him. But another part of him, the part that had felt that first twinge of unease when he found the letter, begged him to go. Just to see, just in case. The next evening, Ethan found himself at the Blue Star Cafe. It was a dimly lit hole in the wall, the kind of place that reeked of burnt coffee and fading dreams. He scanned the room nervously. No one stood out. Just a handful of patrons nursing their mugs, their faces buried in books or glowing screens. Then a man appeared. He was older, mid-60s maybe, with a face weathered like cracked leather. His eyes locked onto Ethan with an intensity that froze him in place. The man walked over, sliding into the booth across from him without a word. You've seen the date, the man said, his voice low and rough. That means it's already started. Started? Ethan echoed, his voice barely a whisper. The man leaned in closer, his expression grave. The future isn't what you think. And if you're not careful, it'll take you too. Before Ethan could respond, the man placed the notebook on the table and stood a small, warn. Don't trust anyone, not even me. And just like that, he was gone, leaving Ethan with a mind racing faster than his heart. He opened the notebook hands trembling. Inside were sketches, futuristic machines, strange symbols, timelines scrawled in frantic handwriting. And then, at the very end, a single sentence. If you're reading this, it's already too late. What would you do if you found a date tied to the future and every answer only led to more questions? Would you walk away or dig deeper? Ethan barely slept that night. The notebook sat on his coffee table, staring at him like an unanswered riddle. His mind churned, replaying the man's cryptic words. If you're reading this, it's already too late. By morning, his life felt split in two. The mundane safety of his routine and the gnawing pull of a conspiracy that felt too elaborate to be a prank. He opened the notebook again, this time determined to make sense of it. Page after page revealed erratic sketches, some of machines that resembled sleek futuristic towers, others of landscapes scarred with strange geometric patterns. Each page felt like a whisper from a world Ethan didn't yet understand. One sketch stood out. It was of a symbol, a circle split in half by a jagged line, with a series of numbers scrawled beneath it. 2032.0327/1218 UTC. The numbers hit him like a jolt. The date from the letter, a specific time. But what did it mean? Was it an event? A deadline? His stomach churned as he searched for any logical explanation. When he flipped back to the first page, a phrase caught his eye. Written in shaky script, it read, "Seek the gatekeeper." The gatekeeper, Ethan murmured, typing the phrase into his laptop. Thousands of results flooded the screen, ranging from mythological references to obscure blog posts. But one link caught his attention. Project Kronos, a gatekeeper to the future. The article described a highly classified experiment conducted in the early 2000s by a shadowy organization called AON Industries. According to the post, Project Kronos was rumored to involve time dilation and parallel realities. The experiment's lead scientist had mysteriously vanished in 2005, leaving behind only fragments of his research. Ethan couldn't help but notice a familiar symbol embedded in the article, the same split circle design from the notebook. Compelled, he dug deeper. AON Industries was notorious in conspiracy forums, often linked to technological breakthroughs that were never made public. Rumors swirled about secret labs, erased timelines, and people who claimed to have seen things they weren't supposed to see. Ethan found himself spiraling down a rabbit hole, devouring every fragment of information. Around noon, his phone buzzed. A text, no caller ID. "Stay offline. They're watching." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Who sent this? How did they know what he was doing? He glanced around his apartment, half expecting to see a shadowy figure outside his window. The streets below were quiet, ordinary, yet the air felt heavier now, every creak in the floorboards sharper. Against his better judgment, he ignored the text and kept searching. Hours later, Ethan found himself in an obscure online chat room dedicated to Project Kronos. Most of the messages were standard conspiracy chatter, debates about whether time travel was real, wild theories about government cover-ups. But then, a user named Gatekeeper, 2032, posted something that froze him. "You've seen the notebook. Meet me at the Crossroads Library. Midnight. Don't bring the notebook." Ethan stared at the message, his pulse pounding in his ears. He didn't respond, unsure whether it was directed at him or someone else, but deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore it. He looked up the Crossroads Library. It was an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city, long shuttered and forgotten. What kind of person would meet there at midnight? What kind of person agrees to meet them? That night, as he approached the library, the air grew colder, almost unnaturally so. The building was a relic of another era, its cracked windows and ivy-covered walls, whispering secrets of its own. Ethan's flashlight barely cut through the darkness as he stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the stale air, and the faint smell of mildew clung to the walls. "Hello?" Ethan called out, his voice trembling. No answer. He wandered deeper into the library, his footsteps echoing eerily. Rows of empty bookshelves loomed around him like silent sentinels. Then, from the far corner, a faint light flickered. Ethan's heart raced as he approached. The light came from an old lantern placed on a table. Beside it stood a man, a different one this time. He was younger, perhaps in his early 30s, with sharp features and a calm, calculating expression. "You're Ethan," the man said, as if it were a fact, not a question. Ethan nodded cautiously. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he slid a file across the table. "AON Industries is watching you. If you want to survive, you need to understand what you've stumbled into." Ethan opened the file, his hands trembling. Inside were grainy photos of people, some in lab coats, others in suits, standing near massive machines. A few pages detailed experiments, diagrams, and what looked like classified documents. One page stood out, a black and white image of the same split circle symbol. "You were marked the moment you touched that notebook," the man said. "They don't like loose ends." "Who are they?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man leaned closer. "You'll find out soon enough, but if you want answers, you need to keep moving. Leave the notebook behind. Burn it if you can." As Ethan drove home that night, his mind was a whirlwind of fear and questions. Who were AON Industries? Why was the notebook so important? And what did this all have to do with March 27th, 2032? One thing was certain. He was in deeper than he ever intended. What would you do if you were warned to destroy something that might hold the answers you've been searching for? Could you walk away? Or would the curiosity consume you? Ethan couldn't shake the man's warning. Burn the notebook. Leave it behind. But how could he? The notebook wasn't just a random collection of scribbles. It was a puzzle, a lifeline to answers. Answers he wasn't sure he wanted, but couldn't walk away from either. That morning, Ethan sat at his kitchen table. The notebook opened before him. He flipped through its pages again, hoping a second or third look might reveal something he missed. That's when he noticed it, a faint watermark on the edge of one of the pages. It was almost invisible, only visible when he tilted the page under the sunlight. The watermark wasn't a logo or text. It was the same split circle symbol. Ethan grabbed his phone and snapped a picture, uploading it into an image search. The results were sparse, but one caught his eye, a 1997 photograph of an experimental lab. The photo was grainy, but in the background was the unmistakable split circle emblem, etched into a machine that resembled a giant metallic ring. The article accompanying the image was from a fringe science journal discussing a rumored project called Chronosgate. According to the article, the machine was designed to manipulate time. The split circle symbol, the piece suggested, represented the boundary between two timelines, one fixed, one fractured. But the project's lead scientist, Dr. Victor Haldane, had vanished under mysterious circumstances before the machine could ever be tested. As Ethan read on, the air seemed to thicken. He wasn't just chasing ghosts. There were breadcrumbs, patterns, pieces of a larger picture, and somehow, he was part of it. Later that afternoon, Ethan noticed something odd. As he walked through his neighborhood, the familiar sights, the coffee shop on the corner, the florist with its rainbow of blooms, seemed off, subtly wrong. The coffee shop's sign, which had always been red, was now green. The florist's window display featured tulips, but Ethan was certain it had been daisies just yesterday. At first, he chalked it up to stress, but the anomalies kept stacking up. At work, his desk calendar had shifted. The date he'd circled for a client meeting was now blank. His favorite podcast had a new episode he swore he'd already listened to, but the description was completely different. Was it paranoia? Or was something truly changing around him? That evening, Ethan returned to the notebook, desperate for clarity. He started mapping out the anomalies, jotting down every inconsistency he noticed. As he wrote, he realized they weren't random. The changes clustered around certain times of day, specifically between 11 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. What was happening during that window? He decided to test it. The next morning, Ethan sat in a cafe, phone in hand, notebook tucked into his bag. He sipped his coffee slowly, keeping one eye on the clock. At exactly 11:03 a.m., his phone buzzed. It was another message from the same unlisted number as before. Stop looking. You're putting yourself in danger. Ethan's hands trembled as he stared at the screen. He looked around the cafe, scanning for anyone who seemed out of place. A man at the counter glanced his way, quickly averting his eyes. A woman by the window appeared engrossed in her book, but hadn't turned a page in 5 minutes. Were they watching him? Or was he losing his mind? At 11:27 a.m., it happened. The world seemed to ripple, not visibly, but in the way it felt. A low hum filled the air, barely audible but unmistakable. Ethan's vision blurred for a moment, and when it cleared, the cafe looked the same, yet different. The layout of the tables had shifted slightly. The barista now wore a blue apron instead of black, and the man at the counter, gone. Ethan's chest tightened. This wasn't paranoia, it was real. He rushed home, heart pounding, and reopened the notebook. His eyes landed on a diagram he hadn't paid much attention to before. It showed a series of overlapping circles, each labeled with a time. The intervals were irregular, but one stood out. 11:27 a.m. The notebook wasn't just a collection of sketches. It was tracking something. Shifts, anomalies. And if he was right, they were happening all around him. Desperate for answers, Ethan reached out to Gatekeeper 2032 in the chat room. Ethan, the shifts are real. I saw it happen. What am I supposed to do? It took a few minutes before a reply appeared. Gatekeeper 2032. If you're seeing shifts, they know you're aware. You've been flagged. Ethan. Flagged? By who? Gatekeeper 2032. AON. They monitor the shifts. You've crossed into their territory. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. AON Industries wasn't just a rumor. They were real, and they were watching him. By nightfall, Ethan's paranoia had reached a boiling point. Every sound, every flicker of movement outside his window felt like a threat. He tried calling his sister just to hear a familiar voice, but the line was dead. Even his internet connection flickered, as though someone, or something, was trying to isolate him. He flipped through the notebook one last time before collapsing into bed. His eyes lingered on one page, where a single phrase was scrawled repeatedly. Trust no one. The future is already fractured. What would you do if reality itself seemed to shift around you? Would you search for answers or try to return to normalcy? Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every creak in the floorboards, every flicker of light in his apartment felt like a signal, a reminder that his world was no longer his own. He stared at the notebook on the coffee table, its pages still open to the ominous phrase, "Trust no one, the future is already fractured." He wanted to burn it. He wanted to follow the stranger's warning, erase the notebook, and whatever trail it left behind, but curiosity clawed at him. He needed answers, needed to understand why this symbol, this date, and these shifts seemed to center around him. It was nearly midnight when his phone buzzed again. "We know you still have it. Stop digging. Destroy it." The text sent a jolt through his chest. He glanced around the room, his breath quickening. Someone knew. Someone was watching. The next morning, Ethan decided to leave his apartment. Staying cooped up felt like a trap. He needed air, space to think. He threw on a hoodie and sunglasses, hoping they'd make him less noticeable, and headed toward the park. The city felt off again. Cars passed as they always did, people hurried to work, but there was an undercurrent of something unnatural. He couldn't quite place it. Was it the way the shadows seemed longer than they should be? The faint electrical hum he swore he could hear in the distance? As he turned a corner, a man bumped into him. Hard. "Watch it," Ethan muttered, steadying himself. The man didn't reply. He just stared at Ethan with piercing, almost unnatural blue eyes. Then, just as suddenly, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan felt something in his pocket. His stomach dropped. Reaching inside, he pulled out a small piece of paper. On it was the split circle symbol, and beneath it, a single line of text. Midnight. Warehouse 12. Come alone. Ethan debated whether to go. Every part of his rational brain screamed that it was a trap, but the part of him that needed to understand, the part that had already followed this mystery too far, couldn't resist. At 11:45 p.m., he found himself standing outside Warehouse 12, a crumbling structure at the edge of the city's industrial district. The air was cold, sharp, with the smell of rust and oil. The building loomed like a monolith, its broken windows staring back at him like empty eyes. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped inside. The warehouse was massive, its cavernous interior lit only by faint streams of moonlight. Rows of abandoned machinery cast long, jagged shadows across the floor. Ethan's footsteps echoed, each step amplifying his growing unease. "Hello," he called, his voice bouncing off the walls. A flicker of light caught his eye. Across the room, a single bulb dangled from a wire, casting an eerie glow over a table. On the table was a laptop, its screen displaying the split circle symbol. As Ethan approached, the screen flickered to life. Lines of text began to appear, typed out as if by an invisible hand. "You've crossed a line. AON knows you're watching." Ethan froze. "They've seen the anomalies. You've been marked as a risk. What do they want from me?" Ethan whispered, as though the machine could hear him. The screen flickered again. Not what, when. Before he could process the words, a low rumble filled the air. The ground beneath his feet seemed to vibrate, and for a moment, the world around him blurred. It was the same sensation he'd felt during the cafe shift, but stronger, more visceral. Suddenly, a voice spoke behind him. "You shouldn't have come." Ethan whirled around. The man with the piercing blue eyes stood in the shadows, his face partially obscured. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, his voice trembling. "I'm here to help you," the man said, stepping closer. His tone was calm, but his eyes carried an intensity that unnerved Ethan. "But you're making it difficult." "Help me? By stalking me?" Ethan shot back. "Who are you, and what does AON want from me?" The man sighed as though frustrated by Ethan's questions. "AON doesn't want anything from you. They want the timeline to remain intact. And you're disrupting it." "Disrupting it? I don't even know what's happening." "You're carrying something you shouldn't have," the man replied, gesturing toward Ethan's bag. "The notebook. It's not just a record, it's a tether. It's pulling you into their field." Ethan clenched his jaw. "If it's so dangerous, why didn't you just take it from me?" The man's expression darkened. "Because it's already bound to you. Destroying it now won't erase what's already begun." "What's begun?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. The man hesitated, then said, "The fracture." Before Ethan could press further, the rumble intensified. The air grew heavy, and the room seemed to warp around them. Objects shimmered, their edges blurring, as if reality itself were coming undone. "We have to leave, now," the man said, grabbing Ethan's arm. "Wait, what's happening?" "They found us," the man hissed. "Move!" Ethan barely had time to react as the man dragged him toward the exit. Behind them, the air split with a deafening crack, and a blinding light filled the warehouse. Ethan glanced back and saw a figure emerge from the light, tall, featureless, its form shifting like static. "What is that?" Ethan screamed. "A correction," the man replied grimly, "and if it reaches us, you'll never find out the truth." They burst through the warehouse doors, the cold night air hitting Ethan like a slap. But even as they ran, he couldn't shake the image of the figure, nor the words the man had spoken. The fracture. If you were told you were disrupting time itself, would you try to fix it or run as far as you could? The night air stung Ethan's lungs as he ran, the mysterious man with piercing blue eyes pulling him along. Behind them, the sound of the crackling rift grew louder, like static tearing reality apart. They didn't stop until they were several blocks away, crouching behind a stack of abandoned shipping containers in a dilapidated industrial yard. Ethan doubled over, gasping for breath. What was that thing? He managed to choke out. The man didn't look at him. Instead, he kept his eyes on the warehouse, scanning for movement. It's a temporal correction. A failsafe AON deploys when timelines go out of sync. That thing wasn't after you. It was after the fracture you've caused. Ethan's head spun. The fracture? What fracture? I didn't do anything. The man turned to face him, his expression hard. You didn't do anything? You picked up that notebook, didn't you? You started seeing the shifts. You started digging. The second you became aware of the timeline anomalies, you became part of the problem. Ethan shook his head, trying to make sense of it. But I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know any of this existed until a few days ago. That doesn't matter, the man snapped. Time doesn't care about intentions. The moment you interacted with that notebook, you disrupted the balance, and now AON is scrambling to fix it. Ethan slumped against the container, his head in his hands. The events of the past few days, the letters, the shifts, the cryptic warnings, were too much to process. Okay, so let's say I believe you. What does AON want, and why me? I'm nobody. The man hesitated, then crouched beside him. For the first time, his voice softened. AON Industries is a lot of things, but at its core, it's a watchdog. They monitor the flow of time, ensuring the future unfolds the way it's supposed to. That notebook, he gestured to Ethan's bag. It's a relic, a fragment of a future that's no longer possible. You weren't supposed to find it, but you did, and now you're tied to it. Ethan blinked. A future that's no longer possible? What does that mean? It means something or someone broke the timeline, the man explained. Think of time like a river. When it flows naturally, everything happens as it should. But sometimes there's a disruption, a dam, a fracture. The timeline splits, creating alternate possibilities. AON's job is to erase those possibilities and restore the original flow. And the notebook? The man's jaw tightened. It's evidence of one of those possibilities. It's tethered to a fracture, a future AON erased. And because you've interacted with it, you're now caught between the erased timeline and the one that's supposed to exist. Ethan felt like he was drowning. So, what do I do? How do I fix this? The man didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was grim. You can't. Once a person becomes aware of a fracture, there's no going back to normal. AON will either erase you or assimilate you into their system. Erase me? Ethan's voice rose. You mean kill me? Not exactly, the man replied, though his tone offered no comfort. Erasure isn't death, it's deletion. You'll never have existed. Every trace of you will vanish, like you were never here. Ethan's stomach churned. And assimilation. They'll pull you into their network, force you to work for them. You'll exist, but not as yourself. More like a tool. Those are my options? Erased or enslaved? The man nodded. Unless Ethan sat up straighter. Unless what? Unless you uncover the truth before they reach you, the man said. The notebook isn't just a tether, it's a map. Somewhere in its pages is the key to understanding what caused the fracture and how to close it. If you can fix the timeline, AON might leave you alone. Ethan's mind raced. You said the notebook was from an erased timeline. How does it even exist? The man's eyes darkened. That's the part that doesn't make sense. AON's methods are thorough. When they erase a timeline, nothing is supposed to survive. The fact that the notebook exists means someone inside AON wanted it to. Before Ethan could respond, a sharp ringing sound split the air. The man stiffened, pulling a sleek black device from his pocket. Its screen glowed red, displaying an intricate web of lines and symbols Ethan couldn't decipher. They're closing in, the man muttered. He grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him to his feet. We need to move. Wait, who are you? Ethan demanded, yanking his arm free. You keep telling me what AON wants, what I've done, but you haven't told me anything about yourself. How do I know I can trust you? The man hesitated, his expression unreadable. Then finally he said, My name is Kieran. I used to work for AON. Ethan stared at him, stunned. You worked for them? I was part of their temporal monitoring unit, Kieran admitted. I helped identify fractures and eliminate them. But then I found something they didn't want me to see. So I ran. What did you find? Kieran's eyes met Ethan's, and for the first time, there was fear in them. That AON isn't protecting the timeline. They're controlling it. The fractures aren't accidents, they're choices. And if we don't stop them, the future they're creating won't include any of us. The weight of Kieran's words settled over Ethan like a crushing wave. The notebook, the shifts, AON's pursuit, it all led back to a single horrifying possibility. The timeline wasn't broken. It was being rewritten. As the ringing sound grew louder, Kieran grabbed Ethan's arm again. We have to go now! Ethan didn't resist this time, but as they ran into the night, one question burned in his mind. If AON controlled the timeline, how much of his life had ever truly been his? What would you do if you learned your entire reality had been manipulated? Would you fight to uncover the truth or try to escape its consequences? Ethan and Kieran ran through the darkened streets, the cold wind whipping against their faces. Behind them, the sharp ringing grew louder, reverberating in Ethan's chest like an alarm he couldn't escape. The city itself seemed to pulse with the sound, shadows twisting unnaturally along the walls. Where are we going? Ethan shouted, struggling to keep up. To somewhere they can't track us, Kieran replied. His voice was tight, his focus unbroken. They turned into an alley and stopped in front of a rusted maintenance door. Kieran punched in a sequence on a small keypad hidden behind a loose brick. With a soft click, the door swung open, revealing a stairwell that descended into darkness. Down, Kieran said, already moving. Ethan hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. The sound, the hum of AON's presence, was closer now, like an invisible tide rushing toward them. Swallowing his fear, he followed Kieran into the unknown. The stairwell led to a cavernous underground space. The walls were lined with outdated servers, their blinking lights casting eerie patterns in the dim light. The air was thick with the smell of dust and metal. What is this place? Ethan asked, his voice echoing. Kieran moved to a central console, his fingers flying across the keyboard. A dead zone. AON surveillance doesn't reach here. They can't track us as long as we stay inside. Ethan dropped into a chair, his legs trembling from the adrenaline. How do they even track us? The shifts? The notebook? It's all connected, Kieran said, not looking up. The notebook's tether to the erased timeline makes it a beacon. They can trace its presence anywhere in the current timeline. Ethan frowned. Then why haven't they taken it already? Kieran stopped typing and turned to face him. Because the notebook is more than a tether, it's encrypted. The information inside it is fragmented, scattered across multiple layers of time. They need you to unlock it. Me? Ethan asked, incredulous. Why me? I'm not some genius or time expert. I'm just a guy who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Kieran's gaze softened, but his tone remained firm. The notebook isn't just bound to the erased timeline. It's bound to you. Something about your connection to it is unique. That's why AON hasn't destroyed it yet. They need you to stabilize the fracture so they can control it. Ethan sat back, the weight of Kieran's words sinking in. The notebook wasn't just a mystery to solve. It was a key, and he was its lock. So if I unlock it, they win? Not if we do it first, Kieran said, returning to the console. The notebook contains coordinates, locations tied to major anomalies in the timeline. If we can reach those points before AON does, we might be able to close the fracture on our terms. And what happens if we don't? Kieran hesitated. If AON stabilizes the fracture, they'll rewrite the timeline entirely. Erase everything they don't deem necessary. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. You mean people? They'll erase people. Kieran nodded grimly. As Kieran worked, Ethan flipped through the notebook again. His eyes landed on a sketch of a machine, one that looked eerily similar to the diagram of Chronos Gate he'd found online. Beneath the sketch was a set of coordinates. These coordinates, Ethan said, showing Kieran, do they match what you're looking for? Kieran's eyes scanned the page, and he stiffened. It's a stabilization node. A what? AON built nodes at critical points in the timeline to anchor their control, Kieran explained. If we can disable this one, it'll destabilize their entire network. Ethan stared at him. You're talking about taking down an organization that controls time itself. Do you even know how to do that? Kieran smirked, a glint of defiance in his eyes. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. The coordinates led to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. By the time they arrived, the air was thick with tension. The factory loomed like a monolith against the night sky, its windows dark and uninviting. This is it, Kieran said, stopping the car a block away. The node is inside. Ethan's pulse quickened. And AON? They'll be here, Kieran said, loading a small device into a backpack. They always are. What's the plan? Kieran handed Ethan a sleek, handheld gadget. We split up. This will scramble their trackers, buy us some time. You'll head to the upper levels and create a distraction. I'll handle the node. Ethan stared at the device, his palms sweating. You're seriously trusting me with this? Kieran met his gaze. You've made it this far, haven't you? The factory was eerily quiet as they entered, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he climbed the stairs to the upper levels. Every shadow felt alive, every sound magnified in the oppressive silence. Reaching the top floor, he activated the scrambler. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and moments later, the factory came alive. Machines whirred to life, lights flickered, and alarms blared. Ethan's radio crackled. Good, that'll keep them busy. Hold your position and stay alert. He barely had time to process Kieran's words before he heard them. Footsteps. Peering over the railing, Ethan saw them. AON operatives, their movements precise and calculated, sweeping the factory floor with military efficiency. They wore sleek, black uniforms, their faces obscured by helmets. One of them looked up. Ethan ducked, his heart racing. He clutched the scrambler like a lifeline, wondering how long it would be before they found him. The radio crackled again. Ethan, they're on to you. I'm almost done here. Just hold out a little longer. Easier said than done, Ethan muttered, pressing himself against the wall. Meanwhile, Kieran reached the stabilization node, a massive cylindrical machine pulsing with light. He set the backpack down and began connecting wires to its control panel. Outside, the air shimmered. A rift was forming. Kieran's voice came through the radio, sharp and urgent. Ethan, whatever you do, don't let them reach you. If they get their hands on you, this is over. Ethan swallowed hard, gripping the scrambler tighter as the footsteps grew louder. If you were in Ethan's shoes, would you hold the line, knowing the odds were stacked against you? Or would you risk running, even if it meant jeopardizing the mission? Ethan pressed his back against the cold steel wall, his breath shallow, the hum of the scrambler buzzing faintly in his hand. Below him, AON operatives moved with precision, their dark uniforms blending into the factory's dim shadows. The whir of their equipment echoed through the vast space, underscored by the heavy thud of boots. He clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of Kieran's warning. If they get their hands on you, this is over. The footsteps were getting closer. He had seconds, maybe less, before they'd find him. Ethan's heart raced as his mind spun through his options. Fight, hide, run? None of them seemed viable, but doing nothing was worse. Taking a deep breath, he glanced at the scrambler. If he could amplify the signal, maybe it would disorient the operatives long enough for Kieran to finish his work. He fumbled with the device, his fingers shaking, searching for a way to boost its range. Then a voice rang out, a voice that sent a chill down his spine. "Ethan Grayson," the figure below called, their tone smooth and commanding. "We know you're here. Surrender now, and this will end peacefully." Ethan froze. The voice was eerily calm, almost inviting. He peeked over the railing, his pulse quickening at the sight of the speaker. A tall, authoritative figure stood at the center of the operatives, their face uncovered. They were sharply dressed, exuding an air of calculated confidence. "We're not here to hurt you," the figure continued, their voice echoing through the factory. "You've been misled. Kieran has filled your head with lies, twisted your understanding of the timeline. But it's not too late to fix this, to fix you." Ethan's grip tightened on the scrambler. Every instinct screamed at him not to trust them, but doubt crept in. What if Kieran was lying? What if AON wasn't the villain he believed them to be? The radio on his belt crackled. "Ethan!" Kieran's voice came through, strained but urgent. "Ignore them. They're stalling. I'm almost done, but I need a few more minutes. Do not engage." Ethan's thoughts raced. The operatives below were spreading out, sweeping the area methodically. He was running out of time. "You're not a bad person, Ethan," the figure below said, their voice softer now. "You were pulled into something bigger than you can understand. But we can help you. We can make this all go away. No more running. No more fear." Ethan's throat tightened. "And what happens to me if I surrender?" he called out, his voice shaky but defiant. The figure smiled, their expression almost sympathetic. "You'll be protected, integrated into the timeline. You'll finally understand your role in all of this." "Integrated?" Ethan spat. "That sounds a lot like being erased." The figure's smile faltered. "Don't let Kieran poison your mind. He's a fugitive, a traitor to the timeline's integrity. He doesn't care about you. He's using you to further his own agenda." Ethan's stomach churned. The words gnawed at him, planting seeds of doubt. Was Kieran really on his side? The radio crackled again. "Ethan!" Kieran's voice was sharp now, almost pleading. "They're lying. That integration they're offering? It's erasure. They'll wipe your existence just like they've done to countless others. Don't listen to them. Trust me." Ethan clenched his fists. The pressure was unbearable, the weight of his choices suffocating. He had no way of knowing who was telling the truth. No way of discerning who the real villain was. Then, a flash of light erupted from below, and the factory trembled. Ethan's head snapped toward the source. It was coming from the direction of the stabilization node. Kieran's voice cut through the static. "They're accelerating the timeline. I need 30 more seconds. Just hold them off. The operatives below reacted instantly, their movements coordinated and swift. One of them shouted, "Move to the node! Secure the asset!" Ethan's pulse spiked. He had to act now or risk losing everything. Without thinking, he grabbed a nearby metal pipe and hurled it toward the far side of the factory. The loud clang echoed through the space, drawing the operatives' attention. "There!" one of them shouted, rushing toward the sound. Ethan took the opportunity to dart to another position, keeping low. He knew his distraction wouldn't last long, but it had bought Kieran a few precious seconds. The figure below, the leader, didn't move. Their eyes scanned the upper levels, sharp and calculating. "You can't hide forever, Ethan," they called out. "This isn't a game. You're jeopardizing the timeline, the lives of millions. Is that what you want?" Ethan didn't respond. His focus was on the scrambler. If he could amplify it just a bit more. The hum of the device suddenly changed, growing louder, sharper. The lights in the factory flickered wildly, and the operatives faltered, some clutching their helmets as if in pain. Kieran's voice crackled through the radio. "That's it! Whatever you did, it's working. Hold on, just a few more seconds." But Ethan's victory was short-lived. The leader raised their hand, signaling the operatives to regroup. They pointed directly at Ethan's position. "Bring him to me," they ordered. Two operatives rushed up the stairs, their movements swift and precise. Ethan's heart pounded as he backed away, his mind racing for an escape route. Then Kieran's voice came through the radio, steady and firm. "Jump!" "What?" Ethan hissed. "Jump, Ethan! Trust me!" Ethan glanced over the railing. The drop was at least 20 feet. "You've got to be kidding!" "No time!" Kieran barked. "They're seconds away. Do it!" Ethan squeezed his eyes shut and leapt. The air rushed past him, his stomach lurching as he fell. He hit something soft, a pile of old canvas tarps and crates that broke his fall. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he was alive. Kieran was there in an instant, hauling him to his feet. "Nice landing! Let's go!" They sprinted toward the stabilization node, where the rift was growing, its light pulsating violently. Kieran pulled a small device from his bag and slammed it into the node's control panel. Sparks flew, and the hum of the rift grew deafening. "What's happening?" Ethan shouted over the noise. "We're destabilizing it!" Kieran yelled back. "This will sever AON's control, at least for now." The rift flashed brightly, and a shock wave rippled through the factory, sending both of them sprawling to the ground. When the light faded, the node was silent. The operatives were gone. Kieran helped Ethan to his feet. "We've bought ourselves some time," he said, breathing heavily. "But this isn't over." Ethan looked at him, his face pale but resolute. "Then what's next?" Kieran's eyes burned with determination. "We find the source of the fracture and we end this." Would you trust someone like Kieran, knowing he might have his own agenda? Or would you seek answers on your own, even if it meant risking everything? The air around the factory was unnervingly still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan and Kieran leaned against a rusted pillar, bruised and exhausted, but alive. The rift was gone, the stabilization node silenced, and AON's operatives had disappeared without a trace. For the first time in days, Ethan felt the faintest glimmer of hope, but it was fleeting. "This isn't over, is it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kieran shook his head. "Number, we may have stalled them, but AON doesn't give up. They'll regroup, recalibrate, and come back stronger." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to believe they'd won something tonight, but he knew better. The notebook still sat in his bag. A constant reminder of the unanswered questions and the fractured timeline they were fighting to save or undo. "So, what's the next move?" Ethan asked. Kieran's eyes burned with a quiet intensity. "We find the source of the fracture. The timeline can't stabilize until we close it at its origin." "And how do we do that?" Kieran hesitated, then pulled a device from his pocket. A sleek, circular gadget with a glowing blue core. "This," It's a temporal anchor. It can trace the fracture back to its source, but what? It's risky, Kieran admitted. Once we locate the source, we'll have to step into the fracture itself. Time inside a fracture is unstable. There's no guarantee we'll come back. Ethan stared at him, the weight of those words settling over him like a shroud. So we either fix this or disappear into oblivion? Kieran nodded. Pretty much. Hours later, they stood at the edge of a remote clearing, on the outskirts of the city. The anchor's glowing core pulsed faster and faster, signaling they were close. The area was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made the hair on the back of Ethan's neck stand up. "What's here?" Ethan asked, gripping the strap of his bag tightly. Kieran scanned the clearing, his jaw tight. "This is the site of the original experiment, the place where AON first fractured the timeline." Ethan's pulse quickened. "And you didn't think to mention that sooner?" "There wasn't time," Kieran replied, already moving toward the center of the clearing. As they approached, Ethan saw it. A faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising from asphalt. The fracture wasn't visible, but its presence was undeniable. The closer they got, the more the world seemed to distort. Colors shifted, sounds warped, and the ground beneath their feet felt almost liquid. Kieran stopped and turned to Ethan. "This is it. Once we step through, there's no turning back." Ethan swallowed hard. "And what happens if we don't make it back?" Kieran gave a grim smile. "Then at least we'll have tried." The moment they stepped into the fracture, the world exploded into chaos. Time unraveled around them, fragmented scenes flashing like broken film reels. Ethan saw glimpses of moments that weren't his, faces he didn't recognize, cities he'd never visited, events that felt both familiar and alien. "What is this?" Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of noise and light. "The fracture," Kieran called back. "It's every possibility that's ever been erased, colliding with what's left of the timeline." Ethan fought to keep his footing. As the ground shifted beneath him, he felt weightless, untethered, as if he could be swallowed by the chaos at any moment. In the distance, he saw it, a massive, glowing structure, pulsing with an energy that made his skin crawl. It was the source of the fracture, a machine that looked eerily similar to the diagrams in the notebook. "That's it," Kieran shouted, pointing to the machine. "That's what's keeping the fracture open." They pushed forward, the distorted landscape pulling at them like quicksand. By the time they reached the machine, Ethan was barely standing, his body trembling from the strain. "What do we do?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. Kieran pulled out the temporal anchor and connected it to the machine. "The anchor will neutralize the fracture's energy, but it needs a stabilizing force. Someone has to stay behind to activate it." Ethan froze. "You mean one of us?" Kieran nodded, his expression unreadable. "The fracture will collapse as soon as the anchor activates. Whoever stays behind will be erased with it." Ethan's mind raced. This was it, the moment where everything came to a head. The fracture, the timeline, AON's pursuit, it all led to this impossible choice. "You planned this," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "You knew one of us wouldn't make it out." "I hoped it wouldn't come to this," Kieran admitted, "but it's the only way." Ethan clenched his fists. "Why me? Why not you?" Kieran met his gaze. "Because you're the tether, Ethan. The notebook chose you. If you survive, the timeline will stabilize naturally. You're the key to restoring balance." Ethan looked at the machine, then back at Kieran. His chest felt tight, his heart hammering against his ribs. "You can't ask me to do this." "I'm not asking," Kieran said, his voice steady. "I'm giving you a choice. The same choice I made when I left AON. To do what's right, no matter the cost. Ethan's eyes burned as he thought of everything he'd endured. The warnings, the shifts, the truth about AON. He didn't ask for this, but here he was, standing at the edge of something far bigger than himself. With trembling hands, he reached for the anchor. "No," Kieran said, stepping forward. "Let me. You have a life to go back to." Ethan stared at him, torn between relief and guilt. "Kieran, Just go," Kieran said, cutting him off. "You've got to trust me one last time." Ethan stepped back as Kieran activated the anchor. The machine began to hum, its glow intensifying as the fracture started to collapse. "Run!" Kieran shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening roar. Ethan hesitated for a heartbeat, then turned and sprinted toward the edge of the fracture. Behind him, the world folded in on itself, light and sound imploding into a single point. He barely made it out before the fracture vanished, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. Ethan collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. The clearing was empty now, eerily calm. The fracture was gone, the timeline stabilized, but Kieran was nowhere to be seen. Ethan pulled the notebook from his bag, flipping through its pages. They were blank now, every trace of its cryptic contents erased. It was over. Or was it? In the distance, Ethan heard a faint hum, the same hum he'd heard when the shifts first began. He looked up, his chest tightening. Had they really won? Or was this just the beginning? What would you do if you were left with no answers but the lingering feeling that the fight wasn't truly over? Would you move on or keep searching for the truth?